Yeah, morning, everyone. Beautiful, sunny Sunday morning. And I'm not at church, so I figured, hey, might as well do another one of these videos that I keep telling y'all that I'll keep doing. Something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I mean, have been for a while, but for some reason, more recently, thinking about Christianity and a lot of the claims that it makes in terms of falsifiability. And like, how do you actually know that these claims are true? In terms of, if you're not familiar with falsifiability, it's just basically the ability of a claim or argument or something to be proven wrong, which is actually considered a strength of a claim, especially in like realms of science, but even just like everyday um, interactions and things. Just think like in terms of science, it's like if you want to test something, you come up with a hypothesis, come up with your experiments, and like you perform your experiments. And if the thing you hypothesize doesn't happen, then you say, okay, it's been falsified. Or if you conduct experiments and come to a certain conclusion, but then someone else finds a different way to test it to disprove your conclusion, and then say, oh, it's been falsified. But even just like in everyday um, life, that's kind of how we typically approach claims by person, especially when it comes to like whether or not you trust someone. You say if they're going to do something for you, then you kind of need to know what it would look like for them not to do that, so you know whether or not they actually came through. Things like that. One of my favorite examples, it's from Carl Sagan's book, Demon Haunted World. It's an example called The Dragon in My Garage. Look it up if you haven't heard of it. Basically, real brief version of that is like Sagan saying, makes up this story where he's like telling you, hey, I have a dragon in my garage. You want to come see it? So you go to his garage, you open it up, but like you don't see a dragon. You just see, a garage. And he says, oh, well, that's because it's an invisible dragon. So you can't see it. It's like, oh, okay. So then you start coming up with all these different tests. Like, oh, well, if it's invisible, then here's what we do. We just like spread like sand or flour or something all across the floor. And then as it's walking around, we can see its footprints. And then he goes, oh, I forgot to tell you, the dragon actually like floats in the air. So he's not going to make any footprints because, it's just floating around like a foot off the ground. So then you start coming up with all this other stuff like, oh, if we just like maybe like throw the flower in the air. I don't remember all the exact examples, or just like spray paint or whatever. And they say, oh, well, he's not a corporeal dragon. Things don't like actually stick to his skin, or it'll just like go through him or whatever. Or, well, let's get well, if it's a dragon, he probably breathes fire, or at least has body heat, so we can get like an infrared gun and pick up like heat signatures or whatever. And actually, no, it's a cold dragon, so that won't work. So you can see like the point here. I'm probably butchering it, but when someone keeps coming up with all these reasons why, oh, you can't see it, or I guess another popular example is like the kid in school says they have a girlfriend, oh, but she goes to another school and it's out of state, and you can't contact her, but she's there, trust me. you know it's a way. So when people use this in real life, it seems to be basically just like a way to shield the claim or belief or whatever from criticism. And I see this happening a lot in Christianity. It's like something I've really noticed now, like coming out of it, and it was a big reason I ended up leaving it. So okay, some of the claims I want to focus on are claims like, God is always good, like God is always faithful, like Jesus never let you down, he never forsakes you, like, or claims like, all things work together for good for those who love God. It's a verse in the Bible somewhere. I don't remember exactly where, but I started thinking about claims like that, especially claim like, like with Easter, um, just happening recently. The story of like Good Friday and Jesus on the cross saying, "Oh God, why have you forsaken me?" And like, there's all kinds of um, hermeneutics and theologies around that, saying like, was he really feeling forsaken, or was he just quoting from a psalm, or the whole psalm actually said he wasn't forsaken? But anyway, this idea that God really never does forsake you. But then, of course, people would say, well, what about these times in my life where it does feel like I was forsaken? Of course, there's the apologetic answer, like, oh, well, even when you feel like you were forsaken, you just weren't. and you're kind of just supposed to believe that. Um, but I started thinking about that, like, but how do you know? Like, so I started thinking about it in terms of falsifiability. Like, okay, but if God did forsake you, or if God did let you down, or if God wasn't faithful, like, what would that actually look like? So I'd be interested, like, if any people watching this have any um, ideas on that, because usually even if I haven't like expressed it in those specific terms, you still feel like there is always some defense about that. You say like, well, something's going wrong. You probably heard answers like, oh, well, you just can't see the bigger picture. Like God's working it out somehow. Just trust him. Just trust him. And I mean, I get that in relationships that there has to be some level of trust, and that there are going to be some things you don't understand. That some situations are just bigger than you, bigger than what you can comprehend or whatever. But I feel like trusting shouldn't just be the default. Like that trust has to be earned first, and from there, you can go on to say, okay, well, because of these things I know, I'm going to trust it, even if things look this way. Again, because of what I know, I'm going to trust that it's not what it looks like, and that things are going to work out, whatever. But it feels like we're just supposed to start in that place of trust, not necessarily having any like concrete reason to, but then still just trust that no matter what things look like, it's gonna be okay. Like one example, and again, going back to that verse saying that all things work together for good for those who love God and called into according to his purpose. And I'm like, I've seen things like in the lives of like a lot of people who love God, who things like seem to not work out for, like for any kind of good, like things that happen in their lives that are just tragic, and there doesn't seem to be any like redeeming quality to it. And then the response I'd get would be like, oh, well, maybe we just need to rethink what it means for things to work out. And honestly, like once you get to that point, like you kind of lost me there. It's like, cause I'm like, cause like, especially if you're gonna take the idea that the Bible was written for us and it's supposed to make sense to us. Like if it says a thing, it should mean that thing. And if we have to redefine what we even mean by those words to accept it, it's like then why did it even use those words to begin with? I'm also thinking like a counterexample was like, will you tell me that um sorry so another thing that people criticize the Bible about is how it seems to like endorse slavery, which it does. I mean, I'm not going to get into all that for now. You can look it up if you want. It just does. But then, given that, I mean, but you're still going to tell me like the Bible still like values human life and human dignity. Is like, I mean, I just have to like redefine what I think of human value and human dignity. That like slavery can still be a part of that. Like, I don't know. So, and then thinking of an example, even in my own life, like people know, like this time 4 years ago, I had stage 4 cancer, and then survived, clearly. And then a lot of people say, "Oh, this is clear example of like how much God loves you and was looking after you and protected you." And like, okay, so again, if we're gonna like falsify this claim, like if I hadn't survived, if the cancer had killed me, would you still claim God is faithful? And like, and you all know how Christians responded to that. It's like, because they all know someone else who like had cancer, some other illness that they prayed for, and they just knew God was going to save and heal, but didn't. Like they didn't get healed, but they still come. Oh well, God is still faithful because we know. You know how it goes. So yeah, I mean, I've already gone for almost 10 minutes here, and this may need to further make some further follow up videos because I have more things I want to talk about. But yeah, just when it comes to these claims like God is always faithful, God's always good, God's never going to let you down, it's like think about and like be honest with yourself, like what would that look like? And come up with like some concrete examples. And don't be afraid of, I guess, yeah, you shouldn't be afraid of, because I think, again, this going back to my experience as a Christian, like I know I would kind of be afraid to come up with specific examples because then I'd be like, oh no, what if one of the things I come up with like accidentally comes true? But then if you can't come up with examples, then like how do you know that? Yeah, I mean that's like I said, the whole purpose of falsifiability is to know, like be able to come up with ways to know if you're wrong. But if you have no ways to know if you're wrong, then how do you know you're right? No, well, I think I'm just rambling at this point. So that's it. Like I said, I'll probably do more follow ups on this because I have a bunch more thoughts on this. All right, later.